What happens when America's most beloved country icon walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly conversation and instead finds herself ambushed on live television? When Reba McEntire sat down on The View, no one expected the Queen of Country to face one of the most explosive on-air confrontations in the show's history. What started as small talk about music turned into a full-blown verbal shootout, a clash so raw, so personal, it divided viewers across the nation and lit up social media for weeks. The View studio was buzzing with that familiar mix of caffeine, nerves, and gossip. The cameras rolled, the lights hit just right, and the audience clapped like they always do, ready for another friendly chat. But this morning wasn't going to be friendly. Across the middle sat Joy Behar, sharp-tongued, smirking, the kind of host who could turn a compliment into a jab without blinking. That smirk was already forming as she shuffled her cue cards, and even the crew seemed to hold their breath. Everyone in that room, Whoopi, Sarah, Sonny, they'd seen that look before. It was the one Joy got right before she threw the first punch. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Reba McEntire," Joy Behar announced with that familiar grin, her voice rising above the cheers of the studio audience. The crowd erupted as Reba walked out, waving politely, her smile warm but steady. Joy leaned forward across the table, still smiling. "Reba, it's so good to have you here with us today." Reba McEntire walked in with that easy Southern grace she'd carried for decades. The red hair, the calm smile, the poise that said she'd seen it all before. She wasn't just a guest. She was country royalty, and she knew it. Dressed in a sleek black blazer with a silver brooch, she looked every bit the legend she was there to represent. Reba took her seat, smoothing the lapel of her blazer. "Thank you, Joy." "It's great to be here," she said, her Southern drawl soft and easy. For a moment, everything felt light. Laughter, applause, that usual talk show charm. But just beneath the surface, something electric was already building. Joy leaned forward, pretending to sound casual. "So, Reba," she began, her tone sweet but her eyes cold, "how does it feel watching your kind of music get buried under TikTok noise and auto-tune kids?" The question hit the table like a dropped glass. Reba smiled, but the corners of her mouth didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, Joy," she said softly, her accent wrapping around the words, "last time I checked, music was still made with hearts, not hashtags." Whoopi glanced sideways. She could feel it too, that shift in the air. The crowd laughed nervously, not sure if they should. Joy gave a little chuckle, but it was the kind of laugh that doesn't reach the stomach. She wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Joy leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the table. "Come on, Reba," she said, her voice dripping with challenge. "You can't seriously tell me these kids with ring lights and filters deserve to call themselves artists. Half of them can't even hold a note without auto-tune doing the heavy lifting." The room went still. Reba didn't blink. She just tilted her head, her voice calm, but carrying weight. "Careful, Joy," she said slowly. "Underestimating people has a funny way of aging badly." A few gasps came from the audience. Joy's smile faltered for a second, and she reached for her mug, trying to keep her cool. Whoopi gave a tiny nod to a producer off camera. The smiles were still there, but they'd turned brittle. The air inside the studio had changed. Tighter, heavier, like everyone knew something sharp was about to drop. Joy leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You know what I don't get, Reba?" she said, with that mocking half laugh that always spelled trouble. "These kids today, they lip-sync a few lines, post it online, and suddenly they've got record deals. Back in the day, you actually had to earn your fame. Now it's just filters and followers." The audience gave a nervous chuckle. Reba didn't move. She just looked at Joy, her expression calm but unreadable. The pause stretched a beat too long, then Reba smiled. Slow, deliberate. "Joy," she said softly, "you were a comedian once, weren't you? Back when jokes had to land without a teleprompter?" The room gasped. Even Whoopi's eyebrows shot up. Joy froze mid-laugh, her face tightening as the weight of that line hit. For a split second, she didn't know whether to respond or to pretend she hadn't heard it. The camera caught everything. Joy's clenched jaw, Reba's unflinching stare, Whoopi's tiny smirk like she'd just witnessed the first punch of the morning. Joy tried to brush it off with a laugh. "Oh, please," she said, waving her hand. "I'm just saying, real artists pay their dues. They don't blow up overnight." Reba leaned forward slightly, voice low but sharp enough to cut through the studio hum. "Paying dues?" she repeated, her accent curling around the words. "Honey, I sang in bars that smelled like spilled whiskey and regret. I didn't just pay dues, I paid them in blood, sweat, and gas money." The audience erupted. Some gasped, some clapped. Joy's laugh came out forced, a little too high-pitched to sound natural. Reba wasn't laughing. Her southern drawl deepened, that familiar warning tone that said she wasn't playing anymore. "Don't mistake visibility for laziness, Joy. Just because you don't understand the grind doesn't mean it's not real." Joy sat back, eyes narrowing. For the first time that morning, she realized Reba McEntire wasn't here to play nice. She was here to set the record straight. The tension that had been simmering finally cracked open. Joy leaned forward, her voice colder now, that fake smile long gone. "Maybe the problem," she said, tilting her head, "is that established artists just can't handle honest criticism." A chill swept through the studio. Even the audience went silent. Reba blinked once, slow, deliberate, like she was making sure she heard that right. Then her tone dropped so low it almost vibrated. "Excuse me?" No one moved. No one breathed. Reba leaned in slightly, her eyes locked on Joy. "Honey," she said, the word landing like a warning shot, "I've been criticized by legends, and I listened." "You? You just throw stones from a glass studio." A gasp rippled across the room. Joy's smirk faltered, but pride wouldn't let her back down. She opened her mouth to speak again, but Reba beat her to it. This time she stood up. Nobody ever stood up on The View. Not guests. Not like this. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You talk about quality control," she said, "like this industry hasn't been peddling garbage for decades. The only thing being controlled is who gets to be heard. And it sure wasn't women like me." The audience froze. Whoopi's eyes widened. Even the camera operators hesitated, unsure whether to zoom in or run. Joy tried to laugh, but it came out dry and shaky. "Now hold on, I wasn't—" Reba took a step closer, her boots clicking against the floor, echoing through the studio. "You think I'm scared of criticism?" she said, her voice steady but full of fire. "I built a career surviving men who told me I was too country, too old, too female. And I outlasted every damn one of them." The crowd broke, half gas, half applause. Joy's face flushed crimson. She grabbed her mug just to have something to do with her hands. Reba didn't let up. "I don't fear criticism, Joy. I earned it. Every bruise, every no, every door slammed in my face. That's what made me. So if you think I can't handle a few lazy comments from a talk show host who's never written a song in her life—" She paused, letting the silence hang. "You might want to think again." Joy's confidence had started to crack. The smirk was gone, replaced by a tight, defensive glare. She leaned forward, her tone sharper, almost desperate. "Oh, please," she said, voice trembling just slightly. "You think selling a few albums makes you better than people who actually deal with real struggles?" That line hit like a slap, and everyone knew it. Reba didn't move at first. Then that polite showbiz smile, the one she'd worn through decades of interviews, slowly faded. What replaced it wasn't anger. It was something colder, heavier. Her eyes narrowed, and when she spoke, her voice dropped to a deadly calm. "Real struggles?" she repeated softly. "I buried 8 of my bandmates in 1 week, Joy." The audience gasped. You could hear it. Reba kept going, her voice steady, her eyes locked on Joy. "Then I got back on stage 3 months later, because my fans needed me. Because quitting would have meant letting the music die with them." Silence swallowed the studio whole. Even Whoopi looked down at her hands, her face unreadable. Reba took a slow breath and leaned in closer. "You don't get to define real joy. You sit in a chair and judge what you've never lived. You talk about struggle like it's a punchline, but for some of us, it's been the price of survival." Joy didn't speak. Her face was pale now, her eyes darting toward the crew, anywhere but Reba's stare. Then Reba took a step forward, closing the gap between them. The air was electric. "You mock what you don't understand," she said, her voice firm, low, and unmistakably final. "You call people princess because it makes you feel powerful. But I've walked through hell in heels sharper than your words." Joy's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The audience didn't move. No one dared. The silence was suffocating. Everyone could almost hear the hum of the studio lights, the tension stretching so tight it felt ready to snap. Then Joy slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing through the room. "You're overreacting," she shouted, her voice cracking under the weight of frustration and fear. Reba didn't even flinch. She just looked at her, calm, steady, like someone who'd been through far worse storms. "No, Joy," she said quietly. "I'm responding to a lifetime of people like you." Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Every word landed with precision, sharp and controlled. "I've fought every battle they said I couldn't win. Divorce, loss, age, reinvention, and here I am, still standing. That's more than most critics can say." Joy's expression shifted. The spark of arrogance in her eyes started to fade. Her hand, still resting on the table, trembled just enough for the cameras to catch it. She glanced around the studio, looking for an ally, a line of escape, anything. But no one was moving. Not Whoopi, not Sarah, not the audience. Everyone was frozen in that moment, caught between disbelief and awe. Reba didn't press. She didn't need to. Her words were doing the work. The calm after the explosion was somehow even more dangerous than the shouting had been. Then after a long, heavy pause, Reba leaned in just slightly, her voice dropping low enough that it forced everyone to listen. "You want to talk about power, Joy?" she said. "It's not about microphones or networks. It's about what you stand for when no one's clapping." That line hit like a sledgehammer wrapped in silk. Joy froze, her mouth half open, her comeback dying before it even formed. Her eyes softened for the first time all morning. "Maybe," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I went too far." For the first time since the interview began, Reba didn't respond right away. She just nodded once, a small, knowing gesture. Whoopi finally exhaled, a breath that seemed to belong to the entire room. Joy's pride finally cracked. Her voice, once sharp enough to cut glass, was now small, almost human. She looked down at her notes, then back up at Reba, her expression unsteady. "You're right, Reba," she said, the words trembling out of her. "I attacked something I don't even understand." Reba stayed on her feet, shoulders squared, but her tone softened. "Then start understanding," she said quietly. "Because the moment you dismiss art, you dismiss someone's story, and stories are what keep us alive." For a second, nobody knew what to do. Then someone in the back of the audience started to clap. It was awkward at first, hesitant, unsure if this was the right time. But it spread. One by one, hands came together until the whole studio filled with applause. Not the kind of clapping that comes with celebrity fanfare, but the kind that comes with respect. Joy blinked hard, trying to keep her composure. Her voice cracked as she spoke again. "My daughter," she said softly. "She listens to those young artists you were defending. She plays me their songs, shows me their videos. And I mocked them. I rolled my eyes. I told her they didn't know real music." She paused, a bitter smile creeping across her face. "You just held up a mirror, and I didn't like what I saw." Reba's eyes softened. She finally sat back down, her posture relaxing for the first time all morning. "Takes guts to admit that, Joy," she said. "Maybe that's the real talent here." Joy let out a shaky laugh, half relief, half regret. The two women locked eyes, and for the first time since the cameras started rolling, the air in the room felt lighter. The air in the studio felt different now. Lighter, warmer, like the storm had passed and left something cleaner behind. The tension that had once filled every corner was replaced by a quiet understanding. Joy sat back in her chair, her voice softer than it had been all morning. "I learned something today," she said, glancing at Reba with a half smile. "When you mock someone's art, you're not just criticizing their work, you're mocking their fight." Reba smiled, that calm southern glow returning to her face. And when you stand your ground with kindness, she said, even your critics start to listen. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The cameras stayed trained on them, capturing something rare. Not a victory, not defeat, but respect. The kind that isn't given, but earned. Joy nodded slowly and Reba returned the gesture. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something real. Whoopi finally broke the silence with a laugh of relief. Ladies, she said, shaking her head, that was one for the books. Reba leaned back and grinned. Guess the view just turned into the lesson. The audience erupted in laughter and applause, the kind that comes when everyone knows they've just witnessed something unforgettable. Even the camera crew smiled behind their lenses. The chaos, the clash, and the clarity all wrapped into one perfect moment of live television. As the show wrapped, the red light on the camera dimmed. Joy leaned over the table, her voice quiet but sincere. Next time, she said with a wry grin, remind me not to pick a fight with Oklahoma Fire. Reba laughed, that familiar warmth back in her tone. Next time, she said, just bring a guitar. I'll teach you what rhythm really sounds like. The two women shared a quick smile before the screen faded to black. Proof that even the fiercest confrontations can end not in bitterness, but in understanding. And somewhere out there, millions of viewers watching from home felt it too. That rare moment when pride gives way to grace. And that's the kind of moment you don't see on television every day. Raw, honest, and unforgettable. If you enjoyed watching that clash turn into connection, make sure to hit subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you think in the comments below. Which part of Reba's showdown hit you the hardest? Stick around, because we've got more unbelievable, true-to-life stories just like this coming your way.